My son's wife looked me in the eyes and said, "If you want to stay here, you must pay rent." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just smiled, walked upstairs, packed my bags, and left their house without saying a single word. 3 days later, I looked at my phone. 27 missed calls were lighting up the screen. If you're drawn into this story already, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Henry Carter. I am 68 years old, and I have been living with my son David ever since my wife passed away. At first, it was meant to be temporary. He wanted me close while I was grieving, and I wanted to help him with his family. I tried not to be a burden. I cooked, I worked in the yard, and I walked my granddaughter Ava to school every morning. She is only 10 years old, and she is the reason I wake up with purpose each day. Ava calls me her best friend. She always says, "Grandpa, you make me feel safe." Those words me going house felt, but not everyone under that roof saw me the same. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, is polite enough of others, but I could feel the tension. She liked her space, and I could tell she thought I overstayed. Sometimes her words carry hints. The bills are high. It's hard having another adult in the house. I kept quiet, telling myself it was better not to argue. David, my son, loved me, but he avoided He worked long hours, came home tired, and rarely spoke up when Melissa threw out her sharp comments. I could see he felt torn between us, but his silence cut deeper than her words. Still, I kept my head down. I told myself I could handle it because I had Ava. Every time she smiled, every time she held my hand, I knew I mattered to someone. She was the light in the house, and I thought she was enough to keep the peace. That was until Melissa finally said what she had been holding back for months. "If you want to stay here, you must pay rent." The moment Melissa said those words, the entire room seemed to go silent. I looked at her, then at David, waiting for him to speak up. He didn't. He just kept his head down, moving food around as if he hadn't heard what his wife had said. That silence was worse than her words. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to remind her that I was not some stranger renting a room, but instead, I smiled, pushed my chair back to the table, and quietly walked upstairs. If my presence in their home was a burden, then I would not argue place. As I packed my clothes into a small bag, Ava knocked softly on the door. "Grandpa, where are you going?" Her little voice filled with worry. I forced a smile and bent down to hug her. "Just a short trip, my little bird. I'll see you soon." She clung to me, refusing to let go until Melissa called her downstairs. That night, I left without another word. I didn't say goodbye to David. I didn't confront Melissa. I stepped out of their home and into the night, carrying only my bag and the weight of my silence. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to go. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the air smelled of cigarettes, and the mattress sagged beneath me. But it was quiet. Nobody looked at me like I was a problem. The first day passed without a call. I told myself it was fine. Maybe David didn't notice yet, or maybe he was relieved. But deep down, I felt the sting of being unwanted. On the second day, I saw his name flash across my phone. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear excuses or apologies that came too late. He called again and again until I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. By the third day, I had convinced myself to move on. I spent the morning sitting on a bench at the park, watching other families walk by. Parents held their children's hands, pushed strollers, laughed together. It reminded me of all the moments I had shared with Ava, the afternoons at the playground, the mornings walking her to school, the evenings reading her bedtime stories when her parents worked late. For her, I had been more than a grandfather. I had been her safe place. And now, I wondered how she was handling my sudden absence. When I returned to the motel that afternoon, I plugged in my phone. The screen lit up, and my chest tightened. 27 missed calls. Every single one from David. My first thought was anger. Now he needed me? Now he realized I was gone? But then fear began to creep in. 27 calls weren't about rent. They weren't about guilt. Something was wrong. I hesitated before picking up, staring at the phone as it vibrated again in my hand. When I finally pressed accept, I heard his voice. And it wasn't the voice of a man angry or demanding. It was the voice of a man breaking. "Dad," he said. His words rushed and shaky. "Please, I need you. Ava hasn't eaten. She won't talk to us. She just keeps crying, asking where you are. She won't sleep. She says she feels like you left her forever. Please, Dad, she needs you." My throat went dry. The motel walls seemed to close in on me. I hadn't thought about how my leaving would affect Ava. I thought I was removing myself from a place where I wasn't wanted, but in doing so, I had taken away the one person who made her feel safe. I could hear her in the background, her small voice calling out between sobs. "Grandpa, come home. Please come home." In that moment, I realized the truth. Melissa might have seen me as a burden. David might have stayed silent. But Ava, my sweet little bird, saw me as her whole world. By leaving quietly, I had hurt the one person who loved me without condition. I ended the call, my hands trembling, and stared at the bag I had packed 3 nights ago. The clothes, the shoes, the few belongings I had carried with me felt meaningless, because the only thing I truly carried was Ava's trust, and I had broken it. I knew what I had to do next. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, the phone still warm in my hand, my heart pounding against my ribs. Ava's voice echoed in my ears, broken and desperate, calling out for me. I had left to keep my dignity, to avoid conflict, to quietly remove myself from a house where I wasn't wanted. But in doing so, I hadn't thought about her. I hadn't thought about how much she depended on me, how deeply rooted I was in her young life. Every day since her mother gave birth to her, I had been there. When she learned to ride her bike, I was the one running behind her, cheering her on. When she fell and scraped her knees, I was the one who carried her inside and cleaned her cuts. When her parents worked late, I was the one who tucked her into bed, reading fairy tales until she drifted to sleep. She wasn't just my granddaughter. She was the only reason I still felt alive after her grandmother died. And now, because I had walked away in silence, she thought I had abandoned her. I rubbed my hands over my face, guilt washing over me. I could hear Melissa's words again. "If you want to stay here, you must pay rent." And I wondered how I had let her decide my worth in that house. Money didn't measure the value of what I gave. Love did. And Ava knew that better than anyone. I stood up suddenly, pacing the small motel room. I couldn't stay here another night. My pride had cost me 3 days of her tears. That was 3 days too many. I grabbed my bag, but I froze at the door. A wave of doubt hit me. What if going back only made things worse? What if Melissa shut the door in my face? What if David's apology was only words, and nothing changed? Could I walk back into that house knowing I wasn't wanted by the adults under its roof? Then I thought of Ava again. I thought of her small arms around my neck, the way she whispered, "Don't ever leave me, Grandpa." She didn't care about the arguments. She didn't care about the rent. All she cared about was knowing that I would always be there. I sat back down on the bed and pulled out a photo from my wallet. It was worn and faded, a picture of me holding Ava when she was just a baby. Her tiny hands had gripped my shirt, her eyes wide, as if the world was brand new. Looking at that photo, I made my decision. Whatever anger or bitterness existed between me and Melissa, whatever silence weighed on me and David, none of it mattered compared to Ava's tears. I would not let her grow up believing her grandfather could walk away and never return. I called David back. He answered on the first ring, his voice still frantic. "Dad, are you coming back? Please tell me you're coming back." "I'm on my way," I said firmly. "But listen to me, David. Things have to change. I will not walk into that house like a guest who overstayed his welcome. I am family. If you want me there, if you want me in Ava's life, then you need to stand up and make that clear to your wife and to yourself." There was silence for a long moment. Then I heard him breathe heavily. "You're right," he admitted. "I should have said something the moment she opened her mouth. I should have protected you, Dad. You've given me everything, and I let her treat you like you didn't matter." "Don't say that to me," I told him. "Say it to Ava. She's the one who needs to hear it." When I ended the call, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I picked up my bag and walked out of the motel, the cool evening air hitting my face. For the first time since I left, I felt certain of what I needed to do. This wasn't about proving myself to Melissa, or even to David. This was about showing Ava that my love for her was stronger than pride, stronger than hurt, stronger than the walls that adults build between each other. As I drove back toward their neighborhood, memories flooded me. Ava running into my arms after school, her laughter when we baked cookies together, her small hand gripping mine during thunderstorms. Each memory reminded me that family isn't about who pays bills or who owns the roof. Family is about who shows up, day after day, no matter what. The house came into view, its porch light glowing in the dark. My chest tightened as I parked on the street. I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, gathering my courage. I knew walking through that door would change everything. Either Melissa would fight harder to push me out, or she would finally see what Ava already knew, that I wasn't a burden. I was her grandfather. I was home. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and stepped out of the car. With each step up the driveway, my heart pounded louder, but there was no turning back now. My silence had caused enough pain. It was time to speak with my actions. I raised my hand and knocked. The knock on the door echoed louder than I expected. For a few seconds, nothing happened, and I wondered if Melissa would even let me in. Then, I heard hurried footsteps from inside. The door burst open, and Ava flew straight into my arms. "Grandpa!" she cried, clinging to me so tightly that I could feel her little heart pounding against my chest. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in my shoulder. "I thought you left me forever." I held her close, my throat tightening. "Never, my little bird. I will never leave you." Behind her, David appeared in the doorway. His eyes were red and swollen, his shirt wrinkled as if he hadn't slept. For the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be, not the man who avoided confrontation, but the son who once looked up to me for everything. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Dad, I'm sorry." Melissa stood further back in the hallway, arms crossed, her face pale. She looked torn between anger and shame, her eyes darting from me to Ava. For once, her voice was quiet. She didn't have the same sharpness that had pushed me away just days before. David stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I should have defended you. I should have told her right then that you weren't just some guest here. You're my father. You're Ava's grandfather. You belong in this house." I shook my head slowly, still holding Ava. "David, I didn't need you to fight for me. I needed you to see me, to remember everything I gave you. The nights I stayed up when you were sick, the years I worked double shifts to keep food on the table, the times I told you that family comes first, no matter what. I didn't want a free place to stay. I just wanted to feel like I still mattered." Melissa finally spoke, her voice shaky. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was protecting our space, our life. I thought if you paid rent, it would make things balanced." She stopped, her words faltering. "But I see now what it did to Ava. I didn't realize how much she needed you." Ava turned her head and looked at her mother, her face flushed with tears. "Mom, I need Grandpa. He makes me feel safe. He makes me happy. Please don't make him leave again." Her words pierced the air, stronger than any argument I could have made. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, looking away as though ashamed to face her own daughter. For a long time, none of us spoke. The only sound was Ava's muffled sobs against my shoulder. Finally, David placed his hand on my arm. "Dad, please come back. Not as a tenant, not as a burden, as family. I can't let this house lose what makes it whole." I looked at my son, then at Melissa, then down at Ava, who held me as though her world would shatter if I slipped away again. My chest ached, not with sadness this time, but with a painful kind of love. I nodded slowly. "I'll stay, but on one condition. From now on, this house is not divided by who belongs and who doesn't. We are a family, all of us. If we forget that again, we'll lose more than just each other." Melissa lowered her head, her voice soft. "You're right. I was wrong. I let my pride and fears blind me. I don't want Ava to grow up thinking love has conditions. I'll do better. We'll do better." The tension in the room broke like a storm giving way to clear skies. Ava squeezed me even tighter, her tears easing into little hiccups. "See, Grandpa? I told you. You belong here." I kissed the top of her head and whispered, Yes, my little bird. I belong here because of you. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost. The feeling of truly being home. It wasn't about the walls or the roof. It wasn't about money or pride. It was about the people standing in that room. As the evening went on, we sat together in the living room. David apologized again, this time in front of his wife and daughter, admitting his mistakes openly. Melissa listened, and though her pride made it hard, she nodded and agreed to change. I could see in her eyes that she was struggling, but she was trying. That was enough for now. Ava curled up beside me on the couch, holding my hand tightly. "Promise me, Grandpa," she whispered. "Promise you'll never leave me again." I looked into her hopeful eyes and made the only promise I could. As long as I'm breathing, I'll be here. In that moment, I knew the conflict wasn't about rent, or space, or money. It was about being seen, being valued, and being loved. And Ava had been the one to remind us all what family truly meant. The night I returned, the house felt different. The same walls surrounded us. The same furniture filled the rooms. But the atmosphere had shifted. For months, I had walked through that front door feeling like a shadow, tolerated, but never truly welcomed. Now, as Ava curled into my side and refused to let go, I realized something had changed. My silence, my absence, and my return had forced us all to face what we had been avoiding. Over the next few days, I began to notice subtle shifts. David made an effort to spend more time at home. He would sit across from me at breakfast and start conversations, asking about my health, my hobbies, even my memories of his mother. It had been years since he looked at me with that kind of interest, as if he remembered I was not just his father, but a man with stories worth hearing. Melissa, too, softened. She was not quick to admit her guilt, but she began showing it in small ways. She invited me to join family dinners instead of eating in silence. She asked for my help in the garden and actually listened when I gave advice. One afternoon, as I watched her teaching Ava how to bake cookies, she glanced at me and said, almost quietly, "Thank you for being patient with me." Those words were not a full apology, but they were a beginning. Most importantly, Ava smiled again. The shadows that had lingered under her eyes began to fade. She walked to school with a bounce in her step, holding my hand tightly as though testing to make sure I was still there. Every night, she asked me to read her a story, and every night, I promised her again that I wasn't going anywhere. Her laughter filled the house, and with it, my heart began to heal. But in the quiet moments, I reflected on what had happened. I realized how quickly family bonds could be shaken by pride and silence. Melissa's words had cut me deeply, but David's silence had cut deeper. I had raised my son to believe family was sacred, and yet he had stood by while his wife treated me like a stranger. And I, in turn, had walked away without fighting for my place, letting my dignity take priority over the love my granddaughter needed. I understood now that silence is not always strength. Sometimes silence is a wound, and it spreads until it hurts everyone around you. I thought of Rowan, my old neighbor, who used to say, "Home isn't where you live, it's who you live for." I never understood that fully until now. My home was not the motel I hid in, nor the house I walked out of. My home was Ava's small hand clutching mine, her voice calling me back, her tears reminding me that love is not measured in rent or rules, it's measured in presence. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange, I sat with Ava on the porch. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Grandpa," she whispered, "when I grow up, I want you to always live with me. I'll never ask you for money. I'll just want you there." Her words broke me in the gentlest way. I kissed her forehead and said, "As long as you want me, I'll be there. That's a promise." Looking back now, I don't see myself as the victim in this story. The real victim was Ava, a child caught between the pride of adults and the silence of her grandfather. She reminded me that sometimes we must put aside our wounded pride to protect those who need us most. She reminded her parents, too, that love is not about conditions or space, but about showing up day after day, no matter the cost. I learned that family will argue, misunderstand, and even hurt one another, but walking away without a word only deepens the wounds. If we want to heal, we must speak, we must stand, and we must remember the ones who are watching us, our children, our grandchildren, because they are the ones who will carry those lessons forward. I don't know what the future holds for us. I know Melissa will have her moments, and David will still avoid conflict sometimes, and I will still feel the sting of pride when I'm overlooked. But I also know that Ava's voice is stronger than any of our flaws. She has taught us all what it means to be a family again. And as I sit here tonight, telling you this story, I can say with certainty that I am no longer just a man staying in my son's house. I am a grandfather who belongs. And for Ava, I am home. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.